How you doing, everybody? Once again, we got another good interview coming for you guys today. Today we have Jasmine. At the age of 15, she was sentenced to 15 years to life. And so, Jasmine, thank you for coming on my show and being willing to share your story with us. How are you
No
doing?
problem. I'm great. Thank you for having me.
hmm And so, if you don't mind, Jasmine, tell us a little bit about yourself. So, where did you grow up at?
Seaside, California. So yeah, Monterey County.
Okay. And so,
hmm
Seaside, that's up there somewhere close to Salinas Valley State Prison, right?
Yes, yes, very much so.
Right. That was the first, actually the first prison that I got sent to. So,
Okay.
what was your life growing up? You had any brothers and sisters, or?
Yeah. So it. I have my mother. She's a single parent. I have two older brothers, and then I had one younger sister at the time growing up. So it was four of us.
hmm
My two older brothers obviously were, caught up in the whole gang life, and they lived that life. Me,
Uh-huh.
on the other hand, I didn't. I was a good kid, went to school, never got suspended or anything like that. So for me to get caught up the way I did was totally not expected. No one even dreamed that that would happen to me.
Right. So, what is well, two questions here. What is your ethnicity, and
Mm.
how much older are your two brothers than you are?
So my father is from Trinidad, that's in the Caribbean, and my mother's from Germany. So
Mhm.
half Trinidadian, half German. I look Hispanic. I get it every day.
Uh-huh.
But my two older brothers, one just turned 46, and then the other turned 41, 42, I'm sorry. And then I don't want to give my age,
Right.
but I'm
Right. No.
40. It's okay. I
Oh,
don't mind.
okay. So your brothers are 1 year older than you and six
Yeah.
years older than you.
Yeah.
Right. So, did they have any type of like influence on you, or I mean, how did you? You said you said that going to school and stuff, you was considered a good girl and all that type of stuff.
I
So,
was.
how did you? What age do you feel you had started kind of like going astray?
Um, Honestly, probably 15, 14-ish, my brothers, they lived that life. They were always in and out, juvenile hall. One of my brothers, actually, the judge, he was so bad as a adolescent, the judge kicked him out of California and sent him to Arizona because he was
Um,
tired of seeing my brother in front of him constantly.
right.
Um, so they really tried their best to, shield me and keep me away from that. You know what I mean? And they didn't really bring that around us, but the family knew what they were involved in.
Mhm.
Um, but so yeah, probably around 14, I would say. That's when I started, smoking weed, drinking, thinking I knew everything, wouldn't come home on my curfew, things like that.
And so, describe the area for individuals who are not familiar with Seaside. Your brothers, you said they were involved in gangs. What gangs were they out there? Were they Crips, Blood,
So Crips
Northerners?
and Crips and Bloods were predominantly back then in Seaside. Back then it was Crips and Bloods. There was a small percentage of like um, norteños, out of Salinas, and an even smaller percentage of the Sureños, right?
Right.
But my brothers were involved with, they were Crips as far as
Oh,
I could remember. Yeah.
right.
So, um, but Seaside back then was, God, horrible. We used
Mhm.
to, there would be drive-by shootings. We'd have to get my mom like, get down, things like that, or constantly hearing sirens, police sirens, ambulance. It was just not considered, it was considered the ghetto. Seaside was
Right.
considered the ghetto. You know what I mean? You didn't, there was Monterey, which was the total opposite spectrum. You know what I mean? That was where, oh, I don't want to offend anybody, but wealthy, I don't want to offend anybody, but
Well,
wealthy people lived. You
right,
know,
right,
people not of color.
right, right.
That's where they lived.
Non-minority type people.
That's who lived in Monterey, and so you
Right.
had Seaside, then you had Salinas, which was just as bad. With the Mexican gangs. Um, But yeah, so it wasn't, you know, it wasn't considered a beautiful city to grow up in. It wasn't considered anything positive back then. Back
Right.
then. Today it's a different story.
And so once you started going astray a little bit, how did your older brothers feel about that?
Oh my God. It was like, what's that saying? Calling the kettle black. What's that
Right,
saying?
right.
Because
Calling the kettle black.
yes, because they were literally doing everything you could think of. I'm talking about robbing people, jacking, you know, just doing everything. And so when they noticed that I started, you know, smoking weed and I probably wouldn't come home on my curfew, they had a fit. They had
Right,
a fit and tried to make my mom ground me to keep me in the house. And they were doing what older brothers were supposed to do. They tried to protect me. They did. They until this day, I can call on them, you know, till this day. But they just did what older brothers were supposed to do and try to protect me and shield me. And but it didn't work. It didn't
right.
work.
Then of course, and you being the normal teenager, you was like, well, how are you guys gonna tell me not to come home and you're outside every night?
Yeah, I was like, what's so fun out there? Like I wanted to see what was going on out there. You know what I mean? And I never got involved in the gangs because that's just not something I was into. But I liked the idea of hanging out. You know, I liked the idea of I don't want to go home right now. I don't, you know. So
Right. So basically you were just cutting class, smoking weed, just hanging out.
not coming home. Yeah, basically, I wasn't. I think, to be honest, I probably stole a little bit out of a store or something like that, but not anything remotely to ever think that I would end up with, you know, a 15 to life sentence, you know, at such a young age.
Now, before you got arrested for the life crime, had you ever been arrested before, or had you ever been in any type of legal trouble?
None. That was my first and only time. That was it. And they gave it to me. My first time, they gave it to me.
So that had to be a shock. So let's step a little bit more into the crime. So what happened? Like you, because you had told me previously that you had got mixed up with an individual, and
Right. So on one of the days, it was summertime, you know, it was nice outside. I was out with my friends. We meet this man and he was 23. So, you know, he was significantly older than I was. And so we exchanged. Back then we had pagers. Remember the
right,
pagers? So
right,
back then we had pagers. So I gave him my number. And if I tell you, it took 10 days, 11 days from the time I met him to the time of my crime.
oh
So,
wow,
yeah. So now looking back, I realized just from remembering the conversations and stuff, he was conditioning me, you
uh,
know, because
right.
he probably looked at me and realized, oh, she's an easy one. I could get her to, you know, go along with anything I say. So
So were you like intrigued with with his bad boy image, or was it the fact that he was older? What kind of like
all of it,
drew you into him?
all of it. I thought he was attractive. I could tell that, you know, he had a bad boy image, like you said, you know, because what 15-year-old should, you know, 15 to 23-year-old, what do they have in common? There's nothing
Right,
there in common at all. You know, what kind of conversation would I have been able to offer? None. I was a kid, you know.
right,
Um, but yeah, I was just intrigued with it all. He was super handsome, I thought, and dang, he took interest in me, you know, opposed to my friends. So I just had a really young mentality, you know, back then. And so I thought I was it, you know, because here it is, this older man who had his sights set on me instead of my other friends, you know. So I just thought that I was it.
right. And so you guys start talking or whatever, and so at some point in time he convinces you to go on a robbery with him. Now before that had occurred, had he tried to get you to commit any other crimes with him?
Yeah, so I remember his sister worked for a law firm and he wanted to set up the lawyer, the head lawyer of the whole firm,
Right.
because his sister, if I remember right, told him that he liked young girls, that young girls would come to his office late night. And so that's what he wanted to do. And me, like, gullible and impressionable, okay, I'll go. I don't have to do anything. I'll just have to get him in a room by himself. And the plan was for him to come in.
Mm-hmm.
It was only, I don't know, God must have been protecting him that night because he never showed up. And so that only infuriated my co-defendant, because now he had that bug in him to want to rob somebody, you know what I mean? And by the fact that this guy never showed up, it just sparked like a fire inside of him, because now he really set his sights on, completing his idea of robbing somebody. So he just focused it on someone else at this point.
So when the life crime occurred, did it happen that same night, or was it after the event where the lawyer didn't show up?
The next day, the very next day, he was not playing, and he just really randomly picked. It was a jewelry store, and so he just randomly picked this jewelry store. He didn't. There was no thought into it, no planning, no nothing. He was just like, I want to go hit this jewelry store. And I'm like, okay, like an idiot. I just fell for it.
So give me a little bit more background. Were you guys riding around in a car at that time, or you passed the jewelry store and saw it, or he said, hey, Jasmine, I got an idea. Let's go hit a lick.
Yeah. So I actually went to school that day. Okay. I went to school that day.
And what grade were you in?
The ninth grade? I was in the ninth grade. Yeah. Or maybe the 10th grade. I'm not too sure. 9th or 10th grade. But I went to school that day, and when I got out of class, he hit me on my pager. And so I called him back, and he said,
I'm just laughing, remembering that old term. He hit me on my
pager. He hit me on my hip. Remember, hit me on my hip. So, but he hit me, and I called him back, and he told me to meet him, because there was like a shopping center right in the middle of where he stayed and where I lived. And so he told me to meet him at the shopping center. And so I did. And directly across the street from the shopping center was another shopping center, but that's where the jewelry store was located. Okay. And so he just basically said, that's what we're going to go do. And I was like, what? And he was like, the jewelry store. And I was like, oh, okay. He was like, don't worry. You don't have to do anything. You just have to pretend to be my fiance, and I'll do all the talking. Don't touch anything, this and that. So.
Right. Okay. So he basically just came up with a plan and just took advantage of you being young, you being gullible, and of course you wanted to feel like you were down and you was in his corner and supporting whatever.
Yes.
He with. So he gives you the script, and within minutes you guys are in the jewelry store.
Within minutes, yeah. He had and so I left out this part, but when I met him at the shopping center, he was with another person, another boy. Right. And I knew the boy from school, because we were kind of similar in age, close in age. And so I knew who he was, and he knew who I was. And so my co-defendant was like, he's going to be the getaway driver. And both me and this other kid, we just didn't have enough sense to walk away from it or oppose any of it. We just both, went along with it.
Right. And so you say you knew the other kid, or at least had seen him around at school. So he was
he was 16 he was 16. Wow. Uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So, looking back, I realized my co-defendant, it's like he knew that I was gullible. He knew, I was easy. I was an easy target, right. And I'm assuming that's what he thought about, my other co-defendant.
Right. And most definitely. And then also, like you say, you had really only been hanging out in the streets maybe 6 months to a year. So
Yeah,
he probably understood and knew through you guys' conversation you wasn't extremely street savvy. And who is at that age, to where
right,
they can match wits with a person 7 or 8 years older,
right.
even if you had been in the streets for a while,
I was so green. I didn't I didn't know. And when he said you don't have to do anything, and even if we do get caught, you're a kid, they would let you go.
Oh
I
wow.
bel
Okay.
I swear to goodness he said that verbatim. And so I didn't have any worry. I was like, okay, if we do get caught, they're gonna have to, my mom's gonna come pick me up like she did my brothers. Sometimes she would get the phone call and say, come get, your son, And so I figured, oh, that would be the same thing for me. But that was
Right.
not the case.
Right. So okay, take us through. So you guys and then so you guys walk in the jury store and your co-defendant starts like he's looking for rings and stuff.
Yep. So when we walk in, there were three people. It was the owner, his wife, and one other clerk. And so when we walk in, I could see the owner. He was in the back of the store with his head down. And I later found out he was cleaning or fixing a watch. So the
Uh-huh.
wife greeted us, walked up to us, and asked, what we were looking for, what we were in the store for. And my co-defendant said um, that I was his fiance and we were looking for rings. And so it was a normal talk. Congratulations. What kind of ring are you looking for? And so she pulled out a book and a catalog at the time, and he
Mhm.
was looking through the catalog, giving her ideas. And he told me to walk around the store to see if I seen something that I liked. And so I did. And while I was walking around the store, the other clerk approached me. And so I was just making small talk with her. Well, he was behind me and I could hear him talking, but it escalated so fast because within probably a minute and a half, I heard a gun go off. And when I
Wow.
turned around, he had shot the owner, at point blank. And so it just went downhill from there. It escalated entirely way too fast.
So I got a quick question. So I'm assuming was your co-defendant, was he black or was he a minority?
He was black, yeah.
So it seemed like his plan wasn't well thought out because it didn't
Not
seem
at all.
he didn't allow the owner time to even pull out the any of the jewelry, so maybe he could just draw down on him. So it's just, I
No.
guess he kind of went in there with to me, which seems like a crazy plan. I mean, if you're gonna go and rob the jewelry store and here's my fiance, at least give him the man time enough to pull some jewelry out and show it to you. And
Later I found out, later that night I found out because his sister was hysterical. His sister was hysterical. Why did you do that? What did you do? Oh my God, those type of feelings and emotions. And so he, as calm as day, swear to God, said, I just wanted to feel like I just wanted to feel what it was like to kill someone.
hmm,
So I didn't know that. I,
right,
I didn't know that. He went in there knowing what he wanted to do already. So like I said, the owner stood up, and if I could remember right, I believe I heard the owner say, how can I help you? And he went to stand up, probably to take his attention off of what he was doing, to give his attention to my co-defendant. But the moment he stood up is when my co-defendant just shot him in his chest.
so it's okay. Well, let me ask you this before I ask you that question. What year was it? Or
1998.
right, okay,
1998.
because I was just wondering, of course, and like you being a person who you're out there, but you're not deep into the streets and knowledgeable about that type of stuff, because it seems like 1998 at that time, it seemed like they would have had cameras, cameras in jewelry stores and stuff like that. But you, I guess, like you being young and naive, and you hadn't considered none of that you would walk in
No,
this jewelry store and you'd be on camera and stuff like that. And
no,
so
because he
go ahead.
went in he went into this like I said, no thought process, no planning, no scoping it out. None of that. None of that. He just went,
And
full fledged.
and then from what you said, it seemed like his mind, he had murder on his mind,
On his mind.
instead of actually performing the robbery. So
Right.
when you turn around and all of a sudden you see or you hear the shot or whatever, what's going through your mind at that point in time? Because I'm assuming you had never seen anyone shot.
No, not in person. You watch the news and you watch movies and stuff, but you don't ever expect to have that happen 2 feet away from you, It was
Mhm.
it was so close that my ears were ringing.
Right.
That's how close I was to him. So when he did it and I turned around, um, obviously I'm registering what's happening. I could see the owner on the floor and I could hear him making like gurgling sounds. His
Mhm.
wife, of course, runs over to him and she's hysterical. The clerk that was helping me is like screaming um, at the top of her lungs. So then my co-defendant turns to her and draws the gun on her and tells her to
Mm.
shut up, or she was going to be next, and to start pulling jewelry out of the case. And so she
Oh,
starts
okay.
pulling bracelets. I think they were like tennis bracelets. And
Mhm.
he was like, I want this case clean. And so she just starts pulling it. And then I had my little backpack purse. And so I already knew, put that in there. So whatever she was putting on the counter, I was just stuffing in my purse. But then he he took off, he ran and left me in the store,
Wow.
and I'm like, yeah, and I'm like, what the hell? So obviously I take off and then he comes back and realizes, oh shit, she ain't behind me. So then he comes back and, you know, of course we run away and, jump in the car and flee the scene. But, cops were everywhere within minutes,
Wow.
everywhere.
So, to me, like I say, it seemed like he was kind of, he was backwards. He was what we would call game goofy, because it seemed like he should have tried to do the robbery before he shot the person. I mean, do you recall any part of the conversation where the man was resisting the robbery, or?
No, all he said was, I think he asked him how he was doing and how can he help him. That was it.
Hmm.
That was it. He didn't give this gentleman a second to even say, you can have anything you want in this store. He didn't give him a second to even react. He just, you know,
Right.
he shot him. It's unfortunate.
Yes, extremely. And so now you're running from the from the store, and you're in the car. So I mean, at what point do you realize, like, damn, I'm in some serious trouble? Or
Um,
did you not even realize that? Did you think that because he was the person who shot the man, that you would not be in any trouble? Because like he had told you earlier, in the event you guys get arrested, he was only going to be in trouble. So what was going through your mind, as you guys are fleeing the scene, or when you're in the car or whatever?
Honestly, I was in shock. I was just in shock, and my adrenaline was on, I think, keeping me going. Um, but he really didn't give me time to react. He told me, I said, I just need to go home.
Mhm.
I wanted to go home at that point, and he was
So
like,
you wanted to pay attention to curfew that day, huh?
I want my mom. I want my mom at this point.
Right.
Um, but no, he told me, and when I said I want to go home, he was like, "Oh no, that's a wrap. You ain't going nowhere." And then I
Hmm.
think that's when it kicked in, like, oh shit, this is serious. So
Right.
yeah.
So then so where you, because you mentioned earlier that his sister was asking him what was wrong with him and this and that. So I'm assuming you guys went somewhere where she was at, or what did you guys do next?
So we went to her house directly after, because that's where he was staying. He was staying with her. So we went to her house and he called her and was like, "You got to come home now." She was at work. And she was like, "Why?" And he was like, "I can't say over the phone, but you just need to get here now." So she got there. And when she walked in, he had all the jewelry laid out on the bed. And she like looked at the jewelry, looked at him, me, and was like trying to process in her mind, I think, like, where did you get all this jewelry from? And so he told her that him and I and somebody else had just robbed the store down the street. And everybody, I'll say this, everyone in that area knew of this particular jewelry store because they had been there for so many years.
Right.
And he was a stiller of the community, which makes it even worse, because
Right.
he would feed anybody that walked into his store if they, you know, were hungry or needed a couple dollars or needed something to drink. He was that kind of man. So that just makes it even all the more horrible, right? So when he told his sister what had just happened is when she freaked out. And then she was like, she was the level-headed one. We got to get you out of here. You've got to leave the city. You know, we've got to get you someplace else. And so she just kind of put the plan into motion, you know.
Right. So let's go back to once you guys ran into the store. I mean, you guys exited the store and ran out of the store, hopped in the car. What is the other teenager, the young guy, the getaway driver? What's his mindset like? Because I'm sure he wasn't expecting to be part of a murder either. So what was he doing? And then once you guys made it to the sister's house, did he come with you guys or he drove off?
No, he drove off. He didn't. I can't remember if he said anything or if he said too much at all. My co-defendant, my co-defendant told him, take us back to where, you know, his sister's house. So he drove us there. I do remember telling my co-defendant, I remember the older one telling the younger one not to say anything, to keep his mouth shut. You know, the
Right.
normal. But he ended up leaving. I don't know where he went afterwards. I didn't see him until he ended up telling on himself months later,
Oh, okay.
because he was arrested like maybe 5 or 6 months later. He told on himself. He
Mm-hmm.
he got comfortable and just started talking, and he told on himself, and then ended up in the same juvenile hall. So
Right. And I can imagine that, you know, like I said, I was talking about that. I do something called a free game Friday, and I was talking about that yesterday. And so I can imagine, of course, you know, him being young, you know, the longer he gets away with it, he's more comfortable now. He's
oh
bragging,
yeah,
you know, hey man, that was me. I was part of that robbery and this and that. And
yeah,
you're telling too many people. Next thing you look up, the police is knocking on your door.
yep, yep. I think that's what happened, because I I had enough sense to know, okay, if he gets caught, that's another person that could, you know, flip the script, you know what I mean? And
Right.
start talking about me and my other older one that was, you know, that did it. So
Right.
he wasn't mentioned at all. You know,
Mm-hmm.
he wasn't mentioned at all until one day we had court, and I see him sitting there in handcuffs. I'm like, what the hell? And
Right.
then it came out that he had a big mouth, and he just started talking and got caught.
So after this robbery, you guys were at the sister's house. The sister is telling her brother, okay, we got to get you out of here. You know,
Yeah,
you gotta go. What transpired and how long did it take before you were
we
either
got caught.
apprehended or you were either your name was mentioning that you was wanted for this robbery homicide?
So there's so many different aspects from the time it started, from the day I caught the crime was committed to the day him and I got caught. So um there was a sketch. The wife had did like a sketch of him and I, you know,
Uh,
so that was right away that night on the 10 o'clock news, you know.
right.
And so my mom, she said she was, for one, I wasn't home, you know, by 10 o'clock. That was my curfew. And so when the
Mhm.
news came on, that was the headlining news, you know. And so
Most definitely.
she's seen the sketch, and she said she knew in her heart that that was me, you know. It was like she said, God told me that was you, you know. But so from the time it happened, the sister put into motion. We went to a hotel. She checked us in a hotel down the way, you know. And then the next day we were gonna leave the city, you know, and go somewhere else. And so we stayed in the hotel that night. And then the very next day, um, she 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 came and got us and drove us to Sacramento. And so we were in Sacramento um, for about 3 days,
Mhm.
But my two friends that I was with when we met him, 2 weeks before,
Uh-huh.
saw the news, and they knew that that was me and him.
Wow.
So they gave the cops my name. So they knew my name.
Mm.
They knew my name. Um, and they knew his name. They knew his first name. And so, the cops were really on it. Honestly, they somehow they tracked us in Sacramento. I don't know how they did that, but they ended up finding us in Sacramento 3 days later. We were staying in a house, and um, there was a little baby, a little toddler, and there was a little toddler and an infant, and the mom had sent the toddler out to throw the diaper away, and the little boy comes in and he goes, "Mommy, there's a bunch of red dots in the bushes." And my co-defendant jumped up because he knew what that meant. They had
Right.
their, infrared.
Guns, guns was blazing.
Yeah. Yeah. And so he jumped up and said, "Get away from the windows." And he shut all the windows. But then soon after that, we could hear the helicopter, and you could see the light shining, like this through the windows, and telling us to come out. And, it was over.
And then, so for everybody who's not familiar with Salinas, about how big is Salinas? Because of course it's a relatively small town, right? And so of course I know that murder was um, big news out there, right?
Well, my case didn't happen in Salinas. My case happened in Marina. So
Oh, okay.
Marina is like in between um uh Seaside and Salinas. It's like kind of like in between Seaside, and it's about Marina's 5 miles from Seaside, right?
Okay.
And then Salinas is, I don't know if I can remember right, maybe 20 miles, 20 miles away. But yeah, it was all over. It was broadcasted all over.
Right. And so you say your two friends, had you been knowing them quite a long time?
Yeah, and I listen, we hung out every day. Like,
Mm,
back then we used to say we were thick as thieves.
right.
No, because they sure gave my name to the police, and so they knew where I lived from that. They knew my name. They just knew it all.
Right. And so you say you guys was on the run 3 days, and they
Three
and they
days.
and they track you down. So
Mm-hmm.
now for individuals who not familiar with, excuse me, with California law, that was a robbery and that was a homicide. So
Right.
uh, due to the fact that you was a juvenile, it may have prevented you, but so your co-defendant, he was only looking at one of two things: either life without parole or the
Or
death
death.
penalty.
Right.
Anytime you commit a murder in the commission of another felony, you automatically become eligible for the death penalty. And
Right.
so, when did you realize that, damn, I'm in some serious trouble? Or when
Right
did it
away.
when did it
Right away.
when they cuffed you?
Yeah, right away. They told me that I was going to be tried as an adult.
Right,
It wasn't, no questions. It was no questions. There was no, by my co-defendant saying, "Oh, you're a kid, they'll send you home, or you won't get that much time." That was not the case. They tried me as an adult. Because I can't remember all five criterias, but there's five criterias that you have to meet to be tried as an adult, and I fit all five criterias, and so my sentence right away went to, or the max that I could get was 15 to life,
mm,
for being
okay,
tried as an adult. So
right. And so, what's that like now when you're finally arrested and you're arrested you're arrested for some extremely serious charges, and you didn't went from living at home and being a regular teenager going to high school to now you're sitting back facing a 15-year to life sentence. What was going on through your mind, and could you comprehend what you had gotten yourself into, and your potential
mm-mm,
future?
mm-mm. I was numb. I remember thinking this was a horrible dream. I remember I couldn't even cry because I was so numb.
Mhm.
And I honestly, to be real, I don't think I truly cried until after I was sentenced, and they closed the doors behind me when I got to Chowchilla. That's when it finally dawned on me, like, this is some real stuff. This is serious. Because for some reason, those 2 years that I fought my case, I was just numb. I think I was just going through the motions, just going through the motions. I didn't really feel anything other than that this is a dream. I'm going to wake up from this one day, but
Right.
I don't know. My mother came to see me all the time. I had visits. I think back then it was twice a week. So I had my visits. I had my phone calls every day. I got mail every day. My mom every week brought me books. And so I had my family, you know what I mean? And they made it as comfortable as possible for me. And I had been there for so long, and the staff um, kind of took me in. And so they would, sneak me in foods that maybe we didn't get, or candies or sodas that we didn't get. And so honestly, I was as comfortable as you could be. You know what I mean? I didn't have to have a cellie because my crime. And so I could have had one, but I didn't want one. And so I was comfortable. It's kind of weird to say that, but yeah, it didn't hit me until about 2 years later after I got to Chowchilla.
And then, of course, so even though you were being charged as an adult, you were kept in the juvenile facility. Um,
Until I turned 18.
was there anyone remotely close to um, charges as serious as yours in that juvenile facility?
Yeah. So at the time that I was there were three other boys there, my age, 16 and 17, who were facing the same thing.
Right,
Little different. They all three of theirs were gang related. Home invasions and stuff
right.
like that. But yeah, they were all facing life as well. But
Now,
go
I'm
ahead.
I'm sorry about that, but I'm assuming they kept you. I'm assuming they kept you separated from the boys, right?
Oh
And
yeah. Oh
there
yeah.
definitely wasn't. So there definitely wasn't any young ladies who were in there
No.
for serious charges.
No, so that's what I was gonna say. Back then, there was only one other girl, female at the time, that was sentenced. She wasn't sentenced to life. I forgot her sentence, but she did have a lengthy. She was sentenced to a long, long time, but she ended up going to CYA. But so she was the only other female before me, but I was the first female in that county to be tried as an adult and to be sentenced to life. So there was no, I kind of felt like I was the experiment. You know what I mean? Because they didn't
Right, right.
have no other females at the time facing that much time being sentenced as an adult. So it was a little different.
And when you say CYA, for those who may not know, she's talking about California Youth Authority, which is
Right.
basically a prison
A
for
baby
those
prison.
under the age of 25. Now, when
Hmm.
you initially was arrested and sent to juvenile hall, how was the staff towards you? Were they very
Ooh.
mean due to the fact that you were in
Oh,
there for a murder?
listen, they hated me. They hated me because he was such a stellar of the community.
Right.
Everybody knew him. And so I had staff members telling me I deserve to die.
Mm,
Whatever happens to me is supposed to happen to me. I never deserved to even have sunlight. They would come get me in the middle of the night and take me to the front where it was the holding cell. It was no lights. It was cold. It was dark. And
right.
keep me in there all night, half the day. No water, no bathroom, none of that. And then there was one staff member. She didn't play. She didn't play at all. I loved, until this day, I still keep in touch with her till this day. She put
Mm.
an end to all of that. And after they seen, could I say her name on here?
Yes, of course. If you want
Okay.
to.
Her name is Charlotte
Okay.
Lee. And I love this lady. I
Oh,
love
shout out
this.
to Charlotte. Shout out to
Yes.
Charlotte.
I love this lady because I would tell her, Charlotte, I called her Big Mama. I said, Big Mama, you know what they did to me last night? And she had a fit. She put a stop to all of that. And I think once the other staff seen that she wasn't participating and she really, was there to protect me, then all that stuff started to die down. But but she was God sent. She really was God sent. And then little by little, you know, different staff members started to realize I was just a kid, man. I was just a kid, you know. And so stuff started to change. But I think my first 5 to 6 months, it was like hell, you know, from the other staff members.
Now I got a couple questions. Was Charlotte Lee, was she a minority or a woman of color?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
she was.
I was assuming that she was. And so I
Yeah,
like to say, you know, for a lot of people out there who don't understand. Now, keep in mind, all these things are going on in a juvenile facility. Now, if at this point in time, Jasmine hadn't even been convicted of the crime yet, but you still have workers at this juvenile facility basically taking it upon themselves to punish her, you know. And
right,
so imagine what goes on in a facility, you know, an adult facility where, you know, um, cops can always take, or the correctional officers can always take things into their hands, you know,
that's right,
and these are things that's not supposed to happen, because, you know, if she's going to be punished, then she'll get, you know, she'll get a sentence and she'll go to jail. But it's not the people working there are not supposed to be unprofessional and
right,
enact a type of punishment on the people that are there. But it happens time and time again. And so
right,
imagine if they're doing all these things to punish and terrorize and traumatize a 15-year-old woman. Just imagine what they do to the men. But so
right,
shouts out to Charlotte Lee, because like you said, she had
yeah,
the strength to stand up to these individuals and
right,
let them know that this is not going to be tolerated.
that's
Like I
right,
said, in the event you get punished, then okay, you'll get punished. You have to serve their sentence. But you know, she wasn't going to allow them to do extras and take the law into their hands
that's
by,
right,
you know, by punishing you. So that's cool. And so eventually, you know, like you say, you're convicted and you are sentenced to 15 years to life. So
hmm,
what was that day like when, you know, and oh, let me back up a little bit. So during those times, of course, after the individual was shot, you had the other people who worked in the store saying that after the owner was shot, you grabbed jewelry and you put the jewelry in your purse. So basically, they were saying that you participated
oh
in
yeah.
this crime and this and that. So basically, you was kind of like, you kind of was cooked. What did your co-defendant, was your co-defendant trying to blame anything on you? Was he keeping quiet or
No, he 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 kept quiet so much where he didn't even try to help me at that point. He could have
right,
said this was my idea, this was, because it was, you know,
right,
he didn't say anything. He just
right,
he wrote it out and just didn't say anything. So,
right?
you
And
know,
like you say, he at least could have tried to help you, or do what, you know, at that point in time. No need for both you guys going to jail. You know, he could have turned around and said, "Hey, man, I scared her. I used to abuse her. All types of stuff." You know,
could have
and
said anything. I still, you know, I remember my mom coming to terms, okay, you still have to go away. And then, but we were hoping for the CYA, you know, because they could have
right,
only held me till I was 25.
right,
And we had the realization I'm gonna have to go away, but I will be gladly accepting of the 20 being released by 25, you know,
right,
because
right,
I knew the other was 15 to life. And so obviously we didn't want the 15 to life sentence, you know, but that
right.
wasn't even an option. That was never an option.
And so, how did you being arrested at such a young age? How did that affect your family, your mothers, your brothers? I know it probably hurt for them to come and see,
Right.
and probably, I'm sure your mother was extremely sad, but I'm sure it hurt
Oh,
your brothers just as well to see their little sister, because you know we want to protect our younger sisters
right.
and the women in our family, and we don't want to, definitely don't want to see any women that we care about in that type of position. So how did that affect your family as a whole?
So it's crazy. So my mom, she, she I called her a Trojan horse because she hit the ground running with me. She never missed a visit. She never missed putting money on my book. She never missed a quarterly package. And sometimes I wanted an extra box, and so I would find somebody to get me an extra box. You know.
Most definitely, I already know. I already know.
And so my mother did everything you could possibly imagine as far as a support system goes. So my two older brothers, they had different reactions.
Right.
My eldest older brother, he I think he might have wrote me once and
Right.
might have sent me pictures of my nephew once. Um,
Mm.
but my other brother, he moved up here. He moved to Madeira to be with me. He moved his family to Madeira.
Mm.
They visited me. Um, I that's how I got to meet my niece, and they brought my niece in to see me when she was, I think, 6 years old, and so she grew up with me in there because she was constantly coming to visit me. So I had their support as well. Like my brother and his wife and my niece stepped in just like my mother did,
Right.
Um, but over the years, I remember my mom having like an anxiety attack one day after she left. She left visiting, and she ended up in the hospital because I think by
Mm.
this time it was probably my ninth year going in. I think I was about my ninth or 10th year, and she just couldn't do it anymore. She told me it's taken its toll on me leaving you, leaving you there. And she said,
Right.
and I can't do it no more. And she says, and she asked my permission if she could move back home to Monterey. And I said, Mother, go. If that's where you need to be, go. I listen, by this time I was acclimated. I was 9 or 10 years in. And so I told my mom, go, I got it. I'm all right. I don't need to see you um, every weekend. But once my brother realized that my mom couldn't visit me anymore, that's when he moved. He totally relocated, and he stepped in. And so I didn't miss a beat as far as my visits went or anything like that. But now when I came, fast forward to me paroling and coming home, my eldest brother, he's been the one. No, I can't say. Both of my brothers have helped me greatly since being home, but my eldest brother, the one that didn't really write me at all,
Mm-hmm.
he's the one that I go to when I really need help, because he feels guilty. And I don't play on that or anything, but he's always apologizing. Even till today, 10 years later, he still apologizes to me for not really being there, for me.
Right.
So he steps in extra now. I
Right.
guess he feels to make up for lost time, I guess.